Hey everybody, welcome back to your Donna Drones podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldai, your host and the CEO of P3 Tech Consulting. We are in Protectors and Defenders Month. And when you think about what we need to protect and defend against, it's cyber threats when we're talking about autonomous systems. And what better person to talk about this than Bob Blakley? He is the operating partner at Team8. We're going to talk all about their initiatives in this space. And so remember, everybody, drop notes in the chat, tell Bob hi, tell us where you're from, ask your questions. We love all of that. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into it. And Bob, first of all, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Don. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I have been doing cybersecurity for longer than seems humanly possible. I started doing it in 1976, believe it or not. I have worked at IBM, I've worked at Gartner, I've worked at Citibank, and also a couple of smaller firms. And about 3 years ago, I moved to Team8, which is a startup creation and investment platform headquartered in Tel Aviv and New York.
Well, that's a great segue. So tell us about Team8. What is it? What does it do?
So Team8 creates companies, fundamentally. We started out creating companies in the cybersecurity space back in 2014. We've been doing that ever since, and we have about a dozen cybersecurity portfolio companies. We then expanded to enterprise software and then to financial technology, and we are in the process of expanding to a couple of other areas, including autonomous mobility. And in addition to creating companies from scratch on our own, we also have a fund whereby we invest in companies as a venture capital investor.
Well, I want to talk about your connection with the Tulsa Innovation Labs, who has endowed your appearance on this episode. You have a connection, Team8 has a connection with Tulsa Innovation Labs. So tell us how you're working with them specifically.
Yeah, so we've been partners with players in the Tulsa region almost since the very beginning. So the George Kaiser Family Foundation is an investor in Team8, and through them we have built a partnership with Tulsa Innovation Labs. Tulsa Innovation Labs is basically the economic development arm of the George Kaiser Family Foundation. And they try to bring strategic focus to economic development by focusing on a small number of areas where Tulsa has deep expertise and an ecosystem of partners. And those include cybersecurity, but also, of course, autonomous mobility and energy technology, because, of course, Tulsa is one of the energy capitals of the world.
It is. There's so much going on. Most people don't realize how much is going on in Tulsa. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. But can you explain to everybody what roles Tulsa Innovation Labs and Team8 play in this collaboration together?
Sure, absolutely. So Tulsa Innovation Labs essentially provides the connections to the local ecosystem in Tulsa. So Tulsa has an ecosystem of enterprise organizations who are users of technology. They're users of cybersecurity technology, of drone technology, of other autonomous mobility technology. They have an ecosystem of investors in startups in the Tulsa area with Attendo Capital and others. And they have an ecosystem of technical experts at the University of Tulsa, at Oklahoma State University in Tulsa, and then further afield in Northwest Arkansas and throughout the state of Oklahoma. And as part of that, they are also helping to develop new talent through university programs and through economic development programs to recruit entrepreneurs and also startup and enterprise personnel to the Tulsa area. So that's what they bring to the table. What we supply in the partnership is a set of global connections to the enterprises in our ecosystem. We're quite a global company, and also a methodology that we use to help develop new companies in a particular area of expertise. And with Tulsa Innovation Labs, we're focusing on problems at the intersection of autonomous mobility, energy, and cybersecurity.
You know, Bob, so many people that follow us probably appreciate that the Mercatus Center out of George Mason University issued that report this year on states' drone readiness. And you know, in our crowd, it was kind of a little bit of an upset when Oklahoma came out #1 over North Dakota this past year. And you know, I think so many people realize what the incredible Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma is doing there. You know, huge fan, love those guys. But you know, most people don't realize what's going on up in Tulsa. And so I love the fact that you're here to tell us about this and how Team8 is playing such a role. And there's a huge autonomy and cybersecurity focus in that area. So let's get back to Team8 for a second and tell us, you know, on your website, you talk about you have put together basically like a village, a network of these kind of cybersecurity related companies. Can you elaborate a little bit about what we're talking about here and what you're bringing kind of to the Tulsa area vis-a-vis your own network?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about our village, we are talking about both a collection of companies and a collection of people. So we curate a set of conferences and a set of online interactions for about 350 chief information security officers of global enterprises. And these are enterprises in a cross section of the entire Global 2000. So there are transportation companies, there are banks, there are insurers, there are consumer packaged goods companies, there are telecommunications providers, there are luxury goods providers, food and beverage companies, law firms, and so on. And these are in some cases our investors. They are in some cases our partners in the development of new startups, and they are in some cases customers or prospective customers who come to us with an idea for a piece of security functionality or other enterprise technology functionality that they see as missing in the ecosystem and that they would like us to apply our expertise to building. But more than that, the village is a community where peers, CISOs, and other executives from member organizations can interact with one another under Chatham House rule with people that they see repeatedly and come to trust.
So we're talking companies from 20 different countries, if I recall correctly. Very big names that people would recognize, like Microsoft and AT&T and Cisco and even Walmart. But it's not just all of these big folks, like you said. It's so many other individuals as well as companies can plug in. So how do people and companies plug into the village if they want to become a part of it?
So we're always looking for new members to join the village, and this will usually start out with an outreach either from us to a chief information security officer of a company that we have identified that isn't currently in the village, or outreach to us from somebody who has heard from a colleague about one of our events or has a topic that they would like to discuss to us. And usually what we'll do is we'll start out by inviting them to one of our events, either our in-person summits, which we hold annually in Tel Aviv and have just started holding in New York, or one of our online what we call Village Huddle events, which are shorter and more focused event for a single topic. And then normally the relationship will progress from there after people get an opportunity to experience the interactions in the village and the kind of content that we're able to bring to people.
So you kind of alluded to this, but just to be more specific, so what do they do when they become a part of it?
So one of the main things that we try to do with the village, I'm sure a lot of people in your audience have been to big cybersecurity conferences like RSA and other events. And there are a lot of great things about those events, CyberTech, Cyber Week, RSA, et cetera. You get to meet with lots of people. There are, vendor presentations about what's new. And there are, there are lots of sessions on stage where experts are speaking to an audience. But the almost universal experience of those events is that everybody comes back from them and gets asked, well, what was the most valuable part of that event? And the answer that people always give is, oh, the hallway conversations were the most valuable part, right?
For sure.
And so what we try to do is with the village is we try to make our events a conversation between the villagers, right? We convene the event and we do curate content from outside experts, which we try very hard to make sure is not salesy content, right? It is thought leadership and current events content from real experts in the field. But more than anything else, what we're really trying to do is we're trying to find out what is top of mind for the members of the village, who in the ecosystem has had experience dealing with a problem, who might be able to help their peers understand what works and what doesn't work in terms of dealing with it, and just give people enough space to breathe and to talk to each other in a relatively relaxed setting, and really have a conversation that is ongoing among the villagers themselves.
Well, that's really also a great jumping off point to talk a little bit about, the problem statement, if you will, because, like you said, Bob, there are other groups that are doing conferences, they're doing summits on cybersecurity. So why did you create, why was Team8 created? In other words, what problem or problems were you trying to solve in its creation?
So we had, I think, two fundamental objectives. The first is, if you look at a traditional venture capital firm, you'll find that there is a relatively high failure rate for investments. And by failure, I don't mean that something gets written down to zero. I mean, something, it has an exit as an acqui-hire or has an exit as a feature of a larger product set. And, that's fine. That contributes technology or expertise to the industry. But what investors are really looking for is more ambitious goals, right? They're looking for companies that end up going public or that end up being acquired and made into a first line product for a major vendor. And the reason that they're looking for those things is because that is an indicator that a really significant problem in the market has been addressed. And so, number one, we are looking for a company creation methodology that has a higher success rate, right? That generates more of those companies that have really significant market impacting outcomes. And when I say market impacting, I don't just mean dollars. I mean, and this is the second thing that we're really trying to do. We're trying to solve harder problems, and it's obviously it's harder to solve harder problems. That's what makes them harder, right?
Right.
If they were easy, they would already have been solved by somebody. And but the barrier to solving a hard problem is usually not that there is some piece of technical invention missing, right? The barrier to solving a hard problem is usually that there are uh, organizational dynamics, or there are regulatory dynamics, or at some level there is a misunderstanding or an imperfect understanding of the business context and what makes a solution succeed. So I worked for many years, for example, in identity. I was the head of the identity and privacy service at Gartner for a number of years. And identity solutions are extraordinarily difficult, not because the technology is complicated, but because identities are, describe humans, and humans are very complicated. And the sorts of, things that are involved in the life cycle of managing an identity are just infinitely varied and weird. And in order to solve a problem like that, you have to do a lot of research and listening and analysis of product market fit and analysis of the economics of a market and analysis of how technical solutions fit into the context of existing business before you can really put something out there that is going to work. So one of the things that we're trying to do with Team8, is we're trying to solve problems that require a lot of upfront work to get them to the point where they're not just going to thrash around for 10 years looking for product market fit.
Well, I mean, you mentioned the word identity. Just that word alone raises all kinds of legal implications, in the US at the federal and state level, and even corporately from a policy standpoint. So, managing that data, protecting that data when it gets inadvertently or nefariously released, how do you address that data? And all the regulatory kind of, as you said, I think thrash that kind of goes around that. I mean, that's a significant problem. So what problems then, is Team8 and Tulsa Innovations working on now? In other words, as you look around, the autonomous market or beyond, and you're thinking cybersecurity, what would you say are some of the toughest issues that still need to be resolved? I can think of some, but I want to hear what you think.
Well, sure, and I'd love to have you give a couple of years when I get done with my list. I think the list is super long, right? So, as like the grounding for the conversation, we're looking to create solutions for new problems at the intersection of autonomous mobility, energy, and cybersecurity. So what problems are new there? Well, let's start out with what you just talked about, right? The privacy problem. One of the things that people really want to do is with autonomous mobility and drones in particular is they want to be able to deliver things, do last mile delivery of things to people's homes. And
Yes.
one of the use cases that they talk about most frequently is delivery of pharmaceutical prescriptions to people's homes, right?
True, true.
And so if you think about the implications of that, so uh, first, there's probably a package with a label on it, right? And what does the label say? Does it say, 1,000 tablets of Viagra for Bob, right? What happens if you drop that in the neighbor's yard and they
Oh,
read the
good
label, right?
Lord.
Right, so a very, very exciting privacy issue. How do you label things that are delivered without the supervision of a human, right? But beyond that, the data network that carries the prescription fulfillment request and then the address of the human and the description of the payload, that doesn't the data connection itself has a bunch of private information in it, and the protection of that information becomes a very interesting problem, particularly, for example, if you've got a drone from pharmacy A operating in an air corridor that is, that's managed by company B, and, on and on and on and on. So privacy problems, the flow of private data across the networks that manage autonomous mobility systems is a very interesting question. Security as a critical component of safety is a very interesting emerging question, right? So far, except for a small number of people who like fall asleep in their Teslas or something, we mostly don't have autonomous vehicles that are completely unsupervised by people. But like if I order home delivery of a bowling ball, that's basically an 18-pound flying missile, and so I have to be careful about how I arrange not just the basic safety guardrails, but also the cybersecurity elements that make it difficult for a bad guy to hijack whatever is carrying that thing and fly it into, a car or something like that. Uh, there are issues of sharing a control plane, right? So if I have a corridor that runs down my street for drone delivery traffic, there are going to be a bunch of different companies whose devices are navigating that corridor. There probably aren't going to be a million different control planes. There's probably going to be one, sort of corridor traffic controller, and how the various constituent organizations manage access to and commands in that shared control plane is a very interesting issue. And then maybe the hardest issue is, if you look at autonomous uh, robots in a factory setting, that's a very constrained setting. Kodak has a giant robot that delivers reels of film backing material into places in their film coating plant, and they have to have that because it has to do its job in total darkness, and humans don't work well, in that environment. So there's this big robot carrying a roll of film that's this wide, and it's running around the floor of the factory, and it never runs over anybody because it just, whenever it sees something in its way, it stops, and people can get out of the way because it's a really constrained environment and the thing isn't moving very fast. An autonomous system which is navigating the outdoor environment has no idea what's going to be in that environment, and in particular has no idea whether somebody is spray painting the stop signs, right? So attacks on autonomous systems by manipulating the inputs to them, the sensory inputs to them, essentially by manipulating the data environment around them in these uncontrolled environments, are going to be a completely new class of problems that we're going to have to deal with in autonomous systems. And then, of course, there are just the issues that we've known about for maybe 40 years, but still haven't developed good math to deal with, which are the issues of emergent systems, right? So one drone flying in an airspace is one thing. 500 drones flying in the same airspace, even if they all have the same programming, is a completely different entity, and it sometimes displays behaviors that are radically unpredictable. So these are some of the sorts of problems that we think are going to require solutions that will probably also require the creation of new companies to implement.
You brought up a whole bunch of ones. Honestly, Bob, I never really thought about the manipulation of the physical environment in a way that essentially tricks sensors into thinking something is different than it actually is. The packaging situation, I mean, I guess as I think through that, right, like when Amazon just drops physically a box on my doorstep, it just says Amazon with my name, like the actual. I'm hoping if they dropped it at my neighbors, they're not opening the box to see what's inside, right? They just see, oops, that's the wrong address. So some of those may be easier than others, but as I look around the world, the biggest thing that jumps out to me, Bob, is this idea of protecting autonomous assets from direct attack, cyber attack, whether it's, you look at Russia, Ukraine, what's going on there, whether it's, and we've seen GPS jamming like forever, right? And Russia has become very, very good at electronic warfare. Spoofing, hijacking, I think is something you mentioned, but all of these things, I think, just in any environment, whether it's indoor, whether it's outdoor, the resiliency and protection of those networks, especially for autonomous vehicles, it is very critical. And like you, Bob, I agree. There's frankly not a ton of companies out there that are kind of making this their bread and butter. I can honestly think of one offhand. We can talk offline. I'm not going to give them a pitch here, but so let's talk about then the inspiration for Team8 to partner up with Tulsa Innovation Labs, because like you said, you're already doing summits in New York. You're out of Tel Aviv originally, and that's frankly a tough neighborhood when you think about cybersecurity and some of the folks looking to hack into systems around there. Why Tulsa? Why this partnership?
So it's interesting. So we have, in some sense, been partners with TIL since before they existed. As I mentioned earlier, I think the George Kaiser Family Foundation has been an investor in Team8. And one of the things that we did in partnership with them as a result of a set of conversations we had a couple of years ago was we created a PhD program at the University of Tulsa called the Cyber Fellows Program. And the reason that we did that, yes, yeah, we love our cyber fellows. If any of y'all are in Tulsa, stop by and talk to them. We think you'll be very impressed. If you want to be a cyber fellow and get a PhD in applied cybersecurity, talk to Randy Roberts at the University of Tulsa like almost immediately, because application window is closing soon. But we created that program because we thought that the transfer of expertise and new ideas from academic research into industry was slow, right? And what we wanted to do was we wanted to create a population of researchers who, as part of their academic training, had exposure to commercial problems, patent law, methodology for building companies, learning where to find VCs and what have you, so that some of them would go on to be entrepreneurs or would go on, to work in larger enterprises and consume innovative technology from small companies, right? So we've been operating that program for a couple of years now. We have about 30 people in the program now as PhD candidates, and it's a great group. And through the process of administering that program jointly with the organization that became TIL, we started having a set of conversations about the expertise and assets in the Tulsa environment, because the faculty at the University of Tulsa work with energy companies, and they work with drone companies, and they work with others. And we were getting exposed to these problems. And after a while, it became evident to us that there was this emerging space of problems that was on the verge of becoming, like really commercially important. And that we already had a partner on the ground who had deep expertise in these areas.
Well, that's super cool. So basically, you're creating cyber warriors for the commercial arena, kind of starting in Tulsa and developing that workforce early, partnering with TIL on. So tell us more about your team. So you mentioned this fellowship. Who else kind of is a part of this localized ecosystem in particular?
The localized ecosystem in Tulsa, yeah. So obviously, we're still in the process of building that out, because we just recently began work on sort of the commercial aspects of this partnership. But Atento Capital, for example, is a VC investor in the Tulsa area. We have so the folks we've been talking to include the autonomous mobility team at Oklahoma State in Tulsa, also to Tyrance Billingsley and his crew at Black Tech Street, which is an organization which is recruiting talent out of the Black community in Tulsa and getting them into the technology ecosystem, and specifically into the cybersecurity ecosystem. And then a variety of enterprise organizations in energy, in mobility, and also, I think importantly, in transportation and logistics. So a lot of people, I think, probably don't know how big a transportation and logistics hub the 412 corridor between Tulsa and Northwest Arkansas is. I was actually, frankly, shocked. So I knew that Interstate 35, which is the busiest interstate highway for commercial trucking in the United States, runs close to Tulsa. It runs through my hometown of Austin. Um, but I didn't know that there is a deepwater port in Tulsa, which seems bizarre. But if you go up the Mississippi and then turn left and go onto the Arkansas River, you can get to the port of Catoosa, which is in Tulsa. The biggest aircraft maintenance facility for commercial aircraft in the country, maybe in the world, is in Tulsa, the American Airlines maintenance hub. And the biggest military maintenance hub is also at a base just outside of Tulsa. And some of the biggest logistics companies in the world are in Northwest Arkansas, so J.B. Hunt and other companies. So and then of course there are enterprise customers who use these services and who are developing autonomous mobility solutions, like Walmart, for example. So there's a lot of this ecosystem on the ground, just right in the local area in Tulsa.
Well, I'm going to revise my earlier statement. You're creating a cyber warrior, diverse cyber warrior workforce for the commercial ecosystem, which I think is phenomenal. And I agree, Bob. It wasn't until I started working with Tulsa Innovation Labs a little bit and learning more about the area where they dwell, how it's almost like a multi-domain mecca, where you can have so many different kind of testing and evaluation opportunities. But let's talk about what's new, because you all are launching this thing called the Foundry, and I want to make sure that people walk away understanding what this Foundry is going to be. So tell us all about it.
Yeah, so the Foundry model is basically Team8's existing model. So when we start to work in a particular topic area, what we usually do is we create essentially an investment thesis, like a regular venture capital firm would, in order to focus our company creation activities. And then what we set about doing is building a set of LPs, limited partners, who are investors, and a set of customer organizations who have needs for technology that doesn't exist yet in that particular area. And we bring that community together, and that's how we create the village around the particular area of expertise. And we then start a process of ideation and de-risking and company creation via recruitment of founders. And that whole process is the Foundry process, right? So that is, and by Foundry, a physical foundry is a place that fabricates typically metal objects, right? It just you put scrap metal in one end and you get engine blocks out the other end, right? So the idea that the Team8 Foundry model, the idea is that we have a process for creating companies from scratch based on ideation with partners who will become customers and some of whom will be investors. And all of that is focused on a particular thesis around what needs to get built in the market, and then a sequence of actions that we take to ensure that there is a viable market for a company, that there is a feasible technical solution, that the players in the market, the people who are going to become customers, can afford to implement the solution, and that it works in their environment. And then finally, that as companies begin building things, that there is product market fit. So when we talk about a foundry, that's what we're talking about. That whole ecosystem of investors, partners, potential customers, founders, and the set of processes that holds the system together in order to produce companies that will bring something which is highly impactful to the market. And so what we discovered through our conversations with TIL is that there's an emerging market opportunity at the intersection of cybersecurity, autonomous mobility, and energy, and that it makes sense to start creating companies at that intersection, and that the both the talent base and the existing expertise and testing facilities and customer set are centered around the 412 corridor, Tulsa and Northwest Arkansas.
So it's so, as I listen to you, Bob, it's almost like a three-legged stool, right? You've got your investors, you've got your kind of end users, and then you've got your founders or entrepreneurs, that you're bringing all together in this Tulsa area. So is the foundry then going to be is it going to be a physical location where folks can, almost like you said, the steel foundry, kind of put the ideas through and come out with something really awesome on the back end?
So, so in terms of it being a physical location, so the foundry will have a staff, right? Because you have to operate every business, and so for example, our existing foundries, the staff is in Tel Aviv primarily, but also in an office in New York. That doesn't mean that all of the companies that get created are going to be in the same building, right? Sometimes some of them, we do for our existing foundry, we do provide office space to early stage companies. Many of them take advantage of that. Not all of them take advantage of that. So, how concentrated will all the activities be? You sort of don't know that until you actually start to build individual organizations. But the foundry will have a physical existence on the ground in Tulsa. Yeah.
And so let's talk about what's next then. So you've come up with this idea with Tulsa Innovation Lab. You've been doing this for a while. It sounds like you're seeking kind of all three legs of the stool, if you will, both but like all three: investors, end users, and potential entrepreneurs. So how do people get involved then? How do they say, hey, I have a great idea in cybersecurity, I want to become a part of this ecosystem? How do they do that?
Yeah. So so to begin with, you're right. We are currently in discussions with potential investors. We are currently in discussions with potential partners who will become customers, particularly around ideation, right? What sorts of problems would they like to see solved? And we are talking to people who we think could potentially become entrepreneurs and company creators in the ecosystem. Obviously, if you have a fantastic idea in cybersecurity as it relates to particularly drones, but also other kinds of autonomous mobile systems, maybe ones that don't fly, satellites, for example. There's a lot of autonomy in space because there aren't a lot of people there. So if you have ideas in any of these areas, we would love to have a conversation. You can get in touch with me, you can get in touch with Connor Godfrey, or you can get in touch with Daniel Plaisance. Both of the latter two are at Tulsa Innovation Labs. I'm just Bob at team8.vc, and I'm sure we can get the information for all of the emails there. But yeah, we would love to have people reach out to us. And if you're interested in any of those roles, right? If you think your organization might be interested in investing in a foundry that creates companies for secure and trustworthy autonomous mobility, love to have that conversation.
That sounds amazing. So tell us a little bit with the time we have left together. As you look out on the horizon, let's just say 2023, kind of the close in this year goals. What are your goals with Team8, Tulsa Innovation Labs, and the Foundry? Do you have timelines, milestones that you're looking to achieve?
Yeah, so 2023 is really going to be the year when we get this off the ground, right? So mostly what we're looking to do is we're looking to recruit the team. We are looking to have a set of deep conversations with organizations that have functional needs in the area, right? Who have a need for a trustworthy system to do XYZ, right? A trustworthy system, for example, to manage traffic in a multi-organization drone corridor, something like that. Who need to be able to test the security and trustworthiness of drone assets in some of the testing facilities that exist in Tulsa that are hard to duplicate elsewhere. So we may or may not get a first portfolio company off the ground in 2023, but we will be working, certainly working toward the objective of understanding the problem that the first company will address, understanding who the customers will be, understanding what the market looks like, how big the market is, and what the space of solutions is, and how those could be bought, installed, and operated by customers.
I know NASA and a lot of the scientific research labs use that TRL kind of level to judge companies, technical readiness level. In other words, 0 to I think it's 6. I think 6 is the top level. So are you looking at companies to come to the table at any of those levels? Or are you really lasered in on these TRL 0, like we've got a great idea on a napkin, we need the money, we need you to help us make it happen? Like when we're talking cybersecurity, what TRL level, if we want to use that kind of analogy, are you looking for in your entrepreneurial partners?
Yeah, so it sort of brings us back to the beginning of the conversation. So we're, in general, the kinds of ideas that we're looking for are probably not napkin ideas, right? We're looking for ideas. So a typical way for an idea to find its way into a Team8 startup is someone who has worked at a big enterprise, has identified a problem that none of the existing off-the-shelf vendor technology solves, and that the organization tried to solve internally and found that just people processes by themselves wouldn't do the trick, right? So they're aware that there is a set of identified businesses with an identified business need for specifically a tool that doesn't exist, right? And so we don't want people to work long and hard on validating a solution, but we do want we do like to work on problems where the problem has been validated in the market, and where we can go out to a bunch of potential customers and they can say, yes, that looks like us, we definitely have that problem, we've been talking about how to solve it, we've tried a couple of times, that has not worked. If you can give us something that solves that problem, then we will be happy to pay for it. And not only that, we'll be happy to help you as an early customer, give you feedback on the implementation, and sharpen the idea so that when it gets out of beta, it is ready for other people to adopt it.
All
So
right.
that's sort of that. I don't know which level that is, but that's a functional description of the level of stuff that we're hoping to encounter.
Well, look, Bob, what's clear is you're looking for real problems, problems that have been validated by people that are experiencing them, that can't find the COTS or commercial off-the-shelf solutions. And essentially, you're like the matchmaker of bringing these hard problems, I think, as you refer to them early on, with the investors that want to back someone that has a potential solution, and you're doing that in the Tulsa area. So I knew our time was going to fly, and it has. So we are like at the end of our time. I would love to give you this opportunity as we're closing our time together. to basically leave any concluding thoughts with the audience about either, how to plug into Team8 or any other thing you want to leave them with before we sign off today.
Well, I guess the thing, so to start off with, Don, thank you very much for hosting this. I really appreciate it. It's been great spending time with you, as I expected it would be. And so I very much appreciate the opportunity. Really, the thing I guess that I would like to leave the audience with is that autonomous systems are going to truly be revolutionary, right? So, we have all sorts of technology that we use today, and almost all of it is either really, really simple, straightforward automation of things that happen in a pretty constrained environment, or they're supervised, right? So your car is supervised. A 787, flying across the Atlantic is supervised. Infinitely chaotic real world, according to a set of finite instructions, and they have to get stuff right. This is not something that we've really done before, with the exception of deep space probes, right? So now we are going to try to solve a problem as hard as automating a deep space probe, except we're going to build 1 billion of them and we're going to release them into the streets of your city. Okay, so
or into the airspace around your
or
city.
into the airspace, yeah, right. It's all over the place. So it's a little frightening, but also it's an amazingly exciting opportunity, right? Like, not a lot of people have a new environment this revolutionary come up, for the first time in their lifetime, in the history of the world, right? So I think it's a fascinating area to operate in, and if you're interested in being one of the early players in the system and solving some of the foundational problems, we'd love to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And everybody out there, you heard it. If you're into cybersecurity, this is why we have Bob here for Protectors and Defenders Month, because when you think about those that protect and defend us, or anybody using an autonomous or semi-autonomous vehicle, protecting those systems is critical. So thank you so much, Bob, for your time. Thanks for what you're doing in this space. Look forward to seeing you in person soon, I hope. And everybody else, we are out here.